Imagine sleeping next to the man you swore your life to, and feeling colder than the winter pressing against the window. Imagine 4 years of silence stretched out like an empty highway. 4 years of waking up beside a stranger who carries your last name, but never your hand. Now imagine, after all that frost, finally finding the courage to say the one word that could end it all. Divorce, 6 letters. One whisper, the kind of whisper that should slip out of a woman's mouth like surrender. But the man across that bedroom doesn't surrender. He doesn't lose. He doesn't let go. And tonight, the moment those 6 letters leave her lips, he's going to lock the door, look her in the eye, and ask for something no woman in her right mind would ever expect. One more night. The radiator in the corner of the bedroom hissed softly, a sound Lena Whitaker had learned to depend on the way some women depend on lullabies. It was the only thing in this house that made noise after midnight. The only thing that didn't ignore her. She sat at the edge of the king-sized bed, her bare feet hovering just above the cold hardwood floor, her fingers wrapped around the silk hem of a robe she had bought 4 anniversaries ago, hoping he would notice. He never did. She glanced at the clock on the nightstand. 12:47. Adrian was still downstairs in his study, the faint blue light from his monitors leaking under the bedroom door like a thin, accusing line. She knew that line. She had memorized that line. It was the line between her marriage and his world, between the woman he'd promised to love and the empire he refused to leave. 4 years, 48 months, 1,460 nights. She had counted them once, on a quiet Sunday in March, sitting on the floor of the walk-in closet that still smelled like the cedar he preferred, scribbling tiny tally marks on the back of a delivery receipt because she didn't have anywhere else to put the weight. 4 years, and she could count on one hand the number of times he had reached for her in the dark. 4 years, and she could not remember the last time he had said her name without a phone in his other hand. Tonight, she had decided, would be the last night she counted anything. The decision hadn't come to her like a thunderclap. It had come the way frost arrives on a window pane, quiet, deliberate, expanding inch by inch until you wake up one morning and realize you can't see through the glass anymore. It had come during a dinner at her sister's house, where she had watched her brother-in-law refill her sister's wine glass without being asked, his fingers brushing the back of her neck in that absent, ordinary way only loved women get touched. It had come during a board meeting where Adrian's assistant had mistakenly placed a hand on his arm to point at a screen, and Lena had felt nothing. Not jealousy. Not anger. Nothing. That was when she knew. Numbness, she had read somewhere, is not the absence of pain. It is the body's final, desperate attempt to survive it. She stood up. The robe slipped off her shoulder. She tightened it again, because some habits, like loving men who don't love you back, refuse to leave even when they should. The hallway outside the bedroom was lined with photographs. She used to think they were beautiful, those framed black and white moments from their wedding, the candid shots from a honeymoon in Lake Como, the formal portrait taken at the Whitaker Foundation's charity gala in Manhattan. Now, walking past them, she saw what she should have seen years ago. In every single picture, Adrian was looking somewhere else. At the photographer. At his phone. At the horizon. Never at her. She paused at the top of the staircase, her fingers tightening around the cold mahogany railing. Below her, the house was a museum of curated wealth, Italian marble floors that her bare feet had stopped warming, a foyer chandelier from Murano, hand-blown, 300 crystals, the kind of light fixture that hovered over family laughter in other people's houses, but only over silence in hers. And, of course, the door. Adrian's study. The door that had been closed against her for 4 years, give or take a handful of nights when he had stumbled in past 2 in the morning, half asleep, smelling of bourbon and other women's perfume, and slid into bed without touching her. She took the first step down. Then, the second. The third creaked. She paused, listening, almost embarrassed at how her own house could startle her. When the silence held, she kept going. By the time she reached the study door, her heart had started behaving badly. She pressed her palm flat against the wood, the way you do when you're checking a stranger's forehead for fever. The grain was warm. He was inside. He was awake. Of course he was. Adrian Whitaker did not sleep the way ordinary men slept. He didn't dream. He didn't drift. He worked, methodically, viciously, the way a surgeon works on a patient who can't afford anesthesia. She lifted her hand. She knocked. The sound came back to her thinner than she expected, like a child's knock, and for a moment, she hated herself for it. Then she straightened her shoulders and reminded herself that she was 31 years old, not 19, not the girl in the white dress in the photograph in the hallway, and she would not knock twice. The door opened. He stood there, framed by the warm gold light of the lamp on his desk, in a dark gray dress shirt with the cuffs rolled twice, the way he always rolled them when he was tired and didn't realize it. His tie was gone. His hair was disheveled in that specific way that wasn't bedhead, but rather the residue of running a hand through it too many times. His eyes, dark and sharp and bottomless, lifted to hers, and for the first time in months, they actually saw her. Lena. Just her name. No surprise. No softness. Just the syllables, low and clean, the way you'd say the name of a person you were trying to remember why you knew. Can I come in? Her voice held. She had practiced it. He stepped aside without a word. The study smelled of old paper, expensive cologne, and the lemon polish the housekeeper used on the bookshelves every Thursday. 3 monitors glowed on the desk, half-finished spreadsheets, an open email thread, a stock chart with a red line slicing across it like a wound. Behind the desk, the window looked out over the snow-covered lawn, the wrought iron gate, the long private driveway that had brought her into this life and was about to take her out of it. She didn't sit. She knew if she sat, she'd lose her nerve. So she stood, 2 steps inside the door, and she let her hands fall to her sides, and she said it the way she had practiced. I want a divorce. The word landed in the room like a coin dropped on marble. It rang. She didn't add anything. No reasons. No accusations. No 4-year inventory of his absences. She had decided in the hallway that she would not justify herself to a man who had never once asked how she was. Adrian didn't move. He didn't speak. For 1 full breath, then 2, then 3, he simply stood there, his hand still on the edge of the door, his eyes fixed on her face with an expression she could not read. She had expected anger. She had expected She had expected, in some small, foolish corner of herself, that he would laugh, because Adrian Whitaker had laughed at fewer things in their marriage than she could count, and dismissal seemed like exactly the kind of moment he might find amusing. She had not expected this. The stillness. The way his jaw shifted, just one. The way his fingers, still gripping the edge of the door, went white at the knuckles. Say it again. His voice was low, quiet, not angry, not pleading. Something else. Something she didn't have a name for. I want a divorce, Adrian. She held his gaze. I've talked to a lawyer. The paperwork is at his office. I'll sign. I'm not asking for anything except my freedom. He didn't answer. He just kept looking at her. And somewhere in the silence between them, she heard the soft, mechanical click of the door behind her. He had closed it. Then, with a deliberateness that made the small hairs on the back of her neck stand up, she watched his hand move to the brass latch above the handle, the latch she had never, in 4 years of marriage, seen him touch. He turned it. The lock slid into place with a sound she felt in her ribs. "Adrian," she kept her voice even. "Open the door." He didn't. He stepped past her, slow, controlled, the way a man walks across a frozen lake when he knows exactly where the ice is thin. He crossed to his desk. He picked up the glass of bourbon she hadn't noticed before, took one slow swallow, set it back down, and turned to face her. "4 years," he said softly. The 2 words almost didn't sound like his. "4 years," she repeated. "And tonight, you decide." It wasn't a question. She lifted her chin. "I decided a long time ago. Tonight, I'm telling you." He nodded once, slowly, as if she had confirmed something he had already suspected. Then he closed the distance between them, not fast, not threatening, but with a gravity that made the room feel smaller. He stopped 2 feet away from her, close enough that she could smell the faint bourbon, the cedar, the cold of the snow he must have stood in earlier that evening when she hadn't noticed him stepping outside. Close enough that she could see the thin gray shadow under his eyes, the kind of exhaustion that had nothing to do with sleep. "Lena," his voice dropped. "Give me one more night." She blinked. "What?" "One night." He didn't look away. "Before you sign anything. Before you walk out that door tomorrow morning. Give me one more night in this house, in this room, as your husband. Just one. And in the morning, if you still want the divorce, I'll sign it myself. I won't fight you. I won't follow you. I'll give you everything you ask for, and nothing you don't." She stared at him. She had spent 4 years rehearsing what she would say to him at the end of their marriage. She had imagined slammed doors, cold lawyers, polite hatred, the long, bureaucratic dissolution of a love that had never been allowed to grow up. She had imagined a dozen versions of this conversation. Not one of them had included this. Not one of them had included him standing in front of her like a man who had finally, 4 years too late, looked up from his desk and noticed his wife was already halfway out the door. She wanted to say no. The word was on her tongue, ready, sharpened, the way the entire night had been sharpened. She had practiced this. She had practiced walking in here, saying the word, and walking back out, head high, dignity intact. She had not practiced the way his eyes looked right now. She had not practiced the soft, almost broken weight in his voice when he said her name like that, like it was something fragile, something he had only just realized he could break. Why? Her own voice came out thinner than she wanted. "Why now, Adrian? You haven't asked me for one night in 4 years. You haven't asked me for anything. You haven't even asked me how my day was. Not once. Not since the September after we got back from Como. So why tonight? Why this?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at the floor. He looked at the window. He looked at the bookshelf behind her, at a row of spines that hadn't been touched since their wedding, gifts from her parents, a leather-bound set of poetry she had once read aloud to him on a Sunday morning, when she still believed in Sunday mornings. When his eyes came back to hers, something in them had shifted. "Because I just figured out," he said, "that I have been the kind of man who finds out what he's lost only after he's lost it. And I am asking you, Lena, for one night, because I am not ready to be that man." "Not with you." She felt the breath catch somewhere behind her ribs. She hated him for it. She hated him because 4 years of cold sheets and empty chairs and unread messages had finally taught her how to leave, and now, in the span of 2 sentences, he had reached into her chest and rearranged the order of everything. She crossed her arms. It was the only thing she could think to do with her hands. "And what exactly does one more night get you, Adrian? An apology you've been writing in your head? A chance to convince me that the man I've been living with for 4 years actually exists somewhere inside you? Because if that's what you're asking for, you can save your breath. I am not your project. I am not a problem you can fix in 8 hours. No, his voice was quiet. You are not a project. He took a single step closer, not enough to touch her, just enough that she could feel the heat of him, the faint, half-remembered warmth she had spent 4 years sleeping 3 inches away from and never reaching for. One night, he said again. Not to fix anything, not to convince you of anything, just to be the husband I should have been from the beginning, for one night, in case it's the last memory you take with you out that door. She closed her eyes, just for a second, just long enough to feel the floor under her bare feet, to feel the heaviness of 4 years pressing against the back of her throat. When she opened them again, he was still standing there, hands at his sides, palms open, the way a man stands when he is asking for something and refusing, on principle, to demand it. The clock on the mantel behind him ticked once. Loudly, she thought of the lawyer's office, the leather chair, the pen. She thought of her sister's voice on the phone last week, low and careful, asking her if she was sure, asking her if she had thought about what came next. She thought of the woman in the hallway photographs, the one in the white dress, the one whose eyes were so full of belief they almost glowed. She thought of all the things she had given up to become Mrs. Adrian Whitaker, and all the things she would not give up tomorrow morning. And then she said it. Because she was tired. Because she was honest. Because some part of her, some traitorous, stubborn part of her, had spent 4 years waiting for any version of this question. One night, Adrian, that's it. One night, and in the morning I sign the papers, and you don't say a word. He didn't smile. He didn't nod in victory. He just exhaled, slow, like a man who had been holding his breath for far longer than the last 10 minutes. One night he agreed, and in the morning, whatever you want. She turned. She walked to the door. She unlocked it herself, because she needed to feel the brass under her own fingers, because she needed him to know that the lock had never been the thing keeping her here. She didn't look back as she stepped into the hallway. She didn't have to. She could feel him behind her, 2 paces away, exactly the distance he had kept for the last 4 years of their marriage. Tonight, she promised herself, would be the only night that distance closed, and tomorrow, she would walk out of this house and never look back. That was the plan. That was the deal. She had no way of knowing, climbing those stairs in her silk robe with her husband's footsteps soft behind her, that the next 8 hours would unearth a secret buried so deep beneath this marriage that the version of herself who had asked for divorce at 12:47 that night would not be the same woman who walked out the front door at sunrise. She had no way of knowing that the man following her up the stairs had been hiding something for 4 years, something that had cost her every cold night, something that, by morning, would make her question whether she had ever known him at all. The bedroom looked different when she walked back into it. It was the same room, same vaulted ceiling, same heavy velvet curtains the color of old wine, same king-sized bed she had picked out at a showroom in Greenwich the week after the wedding, back when she still believed beds were where marriages happened. But standing in the doorway now, with Adrian a half step behind her, every familiar object in the room had taken on a strange, electric quality, as if someone had turned up the brightness on the entire house. The lamp on her side of the bed glowed warmer than it had an hour ago. The hardwood floor, which had felt like a slab of ice when she walked out of this room earlier, suddenly registered against her bare feet as merely cool. She knew it wasn't the room that had changed. She knew exactly what had changed. He closed the door behind them, quietly, almost reverently. The click of the latch settled into the silence with the small, finite weight of a verdict. She turned to face him, arms loose at her sides, and for the first time in 4 years of marriage, she did not know what to do with her own husband. "Sit down," she said, because she needed to feel like she had some control over the next 8 hours, even if the control was small, even if it was only a verb. He didn't sit. He walked, instead, to the foot of the bed. He stopped there. He looked at her across the length of the comforter, across the 4 years of empty space they had each kept to themselves, and his eyes did the strangest thing. They softened. She had not seen Adrian Whitaker's eyes soften in so long that she had begun to wonder if she had imagined the version of him that used to do that. The version who had once watched her sleep on a flight back from Italy and forgotten to drink his coffee because of it. The version who had once stood in the doorway of a hotel bathroom while she was brushing her teeth and said, very quietly, "I don't know how I got this lucky." That version of him had been buried so completely beneath quarterly reports and acquisitions and 2 a.m. emails that she had begun to wonder if he had ever existed at all. Standing there now, in a wrinkled dress shirt with the cuffs rolled twice, looking at her across a bed that had been more friend to her loneliness than her marriage had, he looked like that man again. Not entirely, not whole, but the silhouette of him, the outline. "I don't know how to start," he said. She crossed her arms. "Then don't start." That was the deal. One night, you didn't say anything about words. No, his mouth moved, almost into a smile, then settled back into something tired. I didn't say anything about words. He didn't move. She didn't either. The clock on the dresser, an old brass one that had been her grandmother's, ticked steadily into the gap between them. She thought about how strange it was that a person could share a bedroom with someone for 4 years and still feel, in a moment like this, like a stranger. She thought about how strange it was that strangers, sometimes, were the only people who knew exactly where your wounds were. "Can I show you something?" he said finally. She narrowed her eyes. "Show me what?" "Just something in the dresser." She nodded, slowly, because curiosity is sometimes louder than pride. He walked past her, not touching her, careful in a way that almost broke her, and crossed to the tall walnut dresser in the corner of the room. The bottom drawer. The one she had never opened, because 4 years ago, on the second night they had spent in this house, he had asked her, with an awkward, almost boyish stiffness, if it could be his. Just his. Not because he was hiding anything, he had said, but because every man should have one drawer in the world that was only his. She had laughed. She had said yes. She had not thought about that drawer again. Not really. Not until tonight. He knelt down. He pulled the drawer open. He reached inside and lifted out a small wooden box, the kind you'd find in an antique shop in Vermont, plain pine, a brass hinge, no name. He stood up holding it like something fragile, like something he had been keeping fragile for a very long time. He set it on the bed between them. "Open it," he said. She looked at him. She looked at the box, she thought, briefly, of all the small wooden boxes a person finds at the end of a marriage and the secrets they usually hold. Receipts from hotels she had never visited, numbers without names, the kind of evidence that turns a quiet divorce into a loud one. She lifted the lid anyway. Inside the box, neatly stacked, were letters. Dozens of them. Sealed envelopes, each one written in his handwriting, each one addressed in the same small, careful blue ink to her, to Lena. Just Lena. No last name, no formality, just the 4 letters of her name, written in the slightly slanted script she remembered from grocery lists in the first month of their marriage, and a single Valentine's card the following February. She lifted the first envelope. The date on the back was 3 months after their wedding. She lifted the second. The date was the following June. The 3rd was October. The 4th was the new year. She stopped counting after 7. There were so many. There were so many letters. She looked up at him, and her vision had gone slightly wet, and she hated it, because she had not cried in front of Adrian Whitaker since the 8th month of their marriage, the night he had forgotten her birthday entirely and apologized via text the following afternoon. "What is this?" she asked. Her voice didn't sound like hers. He swallowed. "I started writing them," he said, "the first time I realized I didn't know how to tell you I loved you out loud. I wrote one. I didn't send it. I told myself I would. I told myself I'd give it to you when the moment was right. The moment wasn't right. I wrote another one. The same thing happened. And then I wrote another one. And another one. And after the first 6 or 7, it stopped being about giving them to you. It started being about needing to put it somewhere, anywhere, so I wouldn't forget that I felt it." She stared at the envelopes. She stared at the slant of his handwriting. She stared at the dates. "Adrian," her voice was very small, "why didn't you give them to me?" His jaw moved. "Because every time I tried, I would walk into our bedroom, and you would be reading a book, or you would be on the phone with your sister, or you would be already asleep, and I would think, she's already moved on past me for the day. She doesn't need this. She doesn't need a letter from a husband who is never home. I thought I was sparing you." A laugh came out of her. It wasn't a real laugh. It was the kind of laugh that comes out of women at the end of long marriages, the kind that is mostly air and disbelief and grief. "You were sparing me," she repeated. "Adrian, do you have any idea what I would have given for one of these? Any single one of them? Do you have any idea what I would have done with the knowledge that you thought about me when I wasn't in the room?" His hands moved, then stopped, then moved again. He didn't have anywhere to put them. He finally pressed them flat against his thighs, the way men do when they are forcing themselves not to reach for something. "I know." His voice broke, just slightly, on the second word. "I know now. I didn't know then. I thought you had me. I thought you knew. Every morning I woke up, and you were there, and I thought, this is the woman who knows me. This is the woman who chose me. This is the woman who is not going to leave. I thought knowing was the same as being told. I was wrong, Lena. I have never been so wrong about anything in my life." She picked up the first envelope. She turned it over in her hands. The seal was still intact. None of them had been opened. None of them had been touched, by him or anyone else, since the day each one had been written. "I'm not going to read them tonight," she said quietly. He nodded immediately. "Okay, I'm not promising I'll read them at all." "Okay, I want you to understand," she said, and her voice had steadied now, the way voices do when grief becomes purpose, that one wooden box does not erase 1,460 nights. "I know. I want you to understand that the person you wrote these letters to is not the person standing in front of you. She might be the woman, in some of them. She is not the woman you have left." His eyes closed for a moment. When they opened, there was something raw in them that she had not seen since the first month of their engagement, when he had stood at the kitchen counter of his old apartment and told her, in a voice that had cracked, that his mother was dying. "I know that too," he said. "But you said one night," he added, and there was something almost like apology in it. "And these are mine to give you, tonight. That's all I'm doing. Giving you what I should have given you, years ago." She set the envelope back in the box. She closed the lid. She did not give it back to him. She left it on the bed between them, because it was hers now, and because she had not yet decided what that meant. She sat down on the edge of the mattress. She kept her back straight. She kept her hands in her lap. She did not invite him to sit beside her, because the distance The small, deliberate distance was the only language she still trusted. He stayed where he was. He didn't push. After a long moment, he said, very softly, "Can I tell you something else?" "Not from the letters. Something you don't know. Something I never wrote down." Her eyes lifted to his. "Tell me." He drew in a breath. The room held still around them, the kind of stillness that only happens in old houses at night, the kind of stillness that knows something important is about to be said and is making space for it. "There's a reason I have not been the husband I promised to be," he said. "It is not a good reason. It is not an excuse. But you deserve to know it before you sign anything tomorrow morning. Because if you walk out of this house at sunrise, I want you to walk out knowing the truth, not the version of me you have been forced to live with for 4 years." She stared at him. She had not braced herself for this. She had braced herself for apologies. She had braced herself for tears. She had braced herself, in some small, defensive corner of her chest, for the kind of grand romantic speech that men who have lost the plot of their own marriage tend to give in the final hour. She had not braced herself for the look on his face right now. The look of a man who was about to confess something he had been carrying alone for 4 years. "Adrian," her voice held, "if this is the part where you tell me there's another woman, you can save us both the time. Just say it. I'd rather hear it tonight than read it in a deposition next month." His jaw flickered. Not anger. Almost amusement. The bitter kind. "There is no other woman, Lena." "Then what is it?" He sat down. Not on the bed. On the small upholstered bench at the foot of it, the one she had bought because she had thought foolishly, on the day she purchased it, that they would sit on it together to put on their shoes some morning. He had never used it. Tonight he did. He set his elbows on his knees. He laced his fingers together. He looked at the floor for a long second, the way men do when the thing they are about to say has lived inside their bones for so long that prying it out feels like surgery. Then, he lifted his eyes back to hers. 3 months after we got married, he said, I went to a doctor. She felt her breath stop. He didn't notice. He kept going, because once a confession like that starts, it does not stop until it has cleared the room of everything in its path. I had been feeling something. A pain. Off and on. I thought it was stress. It was the year we acquired Halverson Holdings, you remember. The year I was traveling every other week. I thought it was the travel. I thought it was the deal. I thought it was the wine. His hands tightened. It wasn't the wine. Her hand had moved to her mouth. She did not remember telling it to. Adrian, let me finish. She lowered her hand. She nodded. The doctor sent me for tests. The tests came back. There was something. Not nothing. Something they wanted to watch. They told me, in that flat, careful way doctors say these things, that there was a possibility, not a certainty, but a possibility, that I would not see 50. They told me there were treatments. They told me there were trials. They told me they wanted to start me on a regimen immediately. They told me I should bring my wife to the next appointment. She made a sound. She didn't know what kind of sound. She was not crying yet. She was somewhere worse than crying. She was somewhere the body goes when it has not been told yet how to feel about a piece of information. Why, she said, and her voice was a threat. Why didn't you bring me? He didn't answer for a long time. When he did, his voice was lower than she had ever heard it. Because I had watched my mother die, he said, and I had watched my father turn into a ghost in the 3 years it took her to do it. I had watched a marriage I once thought was the best marriage in the world rot inside the walls of a hospital. I had watched my father stop being a husband and start being a caretaker, and I had watched my mother stop being a wife and start being a patient, and I had told myself, when I was 19 years old and sitting in a hallway outside an oncology ward, that I would never do that to anyone I loved. Never. I would die first. I would disappear first. I would not be the man who turned the woman he loved into a nurse. She was crying now. She had not given herself permission. The tears had come anyway. So instead, she said, "You turned me into a stranger." He flinched. He did not deny it. "Yes, you let me think for 4 years that you didn't love me. Yes, you let me sit in this house, in that bed, in those photographs in the hallway, thinking I had done something wrong, thinking I wasn't enough, thinking my husband was a man who could not be reached. You let me believe that, Adrian. You let me believe it for 4 years. I know. Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice broke open. "Why didn't you let me decide? Why didn't you let me be your wife in the only way that ever would have mattered?" He stood up. He didn't come closer. He stayed exactly where he was, 6 feet away from her, his hands open at his sides, the way a man stands when he knows there is no version of this moment where he gets to be forgiven. "Because I am a coward, Lena." His voice did not shake. He had clearly said this sentence to himself many times. "Because I am a man who knows how to run a company and does not know how to lose someone he loves. Because I had a plan. I had a plan. And the plan was to keep you at a distance until the treatments were done. Until I knew what I was. Until I knew whether you were going to be a widow at 35 or a wife at 50. And then, when I knew, I was going to come back. I was going to walk into our bedroom one night, like a man returning from a war, and I was going to ask you to forgive me, and I was going to spend the rest of my life making up for the years I had spent at a distance." A laugh tore out of her. A real one this time. Raw. Painful. Almost angry. "And how was that working out, Adrian? How was the plan? Because from where I sit, on this bed, in this bedroom, on the night I asked you for a divorce, the plan was working very well. Very, very well. The plan was working until tonight." His voice was steady. "Tonight, the plan met its end." She looked at him. She looked at him for a very long time. The room around them had gone soft and strange the way rooms do when the truth finally arrives in them. She thought of the 4 years she had spent reading meaning into his silences. She thought of every cold night and every untouched plate and every dinner she had eaten alone at the long mahogany table in the dining room downstairs, looking at his empty chair and inventing reasons for his absence. She thought of how many of those reasons had been wrong. She thought of how many of them, in the end, had been less cruel than the truth. "Are you sick now?" she asked. Her voice was bare. He shook his head. Slowly, the last scan was clean. 3 months ago, the doctors used the word remission. They told me, in that same flat, careful way, that I could start to plan again. They told me I could think about a future. His eyes lifted to hers. And the first thing I did, Lena, the very first thing, was sit in my car, in the hospital parking garage, and write you a letter. The last one in that box. The one on top, the one I was going to give you for our 5th anniversary in March. She did not move. She did not look at the box. She did not trust herself to. "And you didn't think," she said, "that maybe before March, you could have walked into our bedroom and said, 'Lena, I am alive. Lena, I am still here. Lena, I have been carrying something terrible by myself for 4 years, and I am ready to let it go.'" His head bowed. "I thought," he said, "that I had ruined too much already. I thought you had built a life around the version of me you could survive. I thought if I came back to you, fully, I would only be asking you to grieve a different man." She closed her eyes. The room moved around her. She felt the 4 years collapse, like a building she had been living in suddenly remembering it had been built on sand. Every cold night reframed, every distance reread, every photograph in the hallway suddenly making a different kind of terrible sense, He had not been looking at the photographer. He had not been looking at the horizon. He had been looking, in every single one of those frames, at the door. The door he had thought he was walking through, alone, for her sake. She opened her eyes. He was still there, still 6 feet away, still waiting. Still, she realized with a small, sharp surprise, the man she had married. Buried under the silence, buried under the cowardice, buried under the 4 years he had spent trying to protect her from a future he had been too afraid to let her share, but still him. "You should have told me," she said. "Yes, you should have trusted me. Yes, you don't get to decide alone what kind of marriage we have, Adrian. You don't get to be the only voice in this room. That is not love. That is fear, wearing love's coat." His eyes were wet now. She had never seen Adrian Whitaker's eyes wet. Not at his mother's funeral. Not on their wedding day. Not on any of the small, gray afternoons she had begged the universe for some sign that he still felt her in the room. "I know," he said. "I know that now. I asked you for a divorce tonight," she said, "because I thought you had stopped seeing me. I did not know you had been trying not to make me watch you die." His mouth opened. Nothing came out. "I want you to understand," she said, and her voice steadied itself the way voices do when they have nowhere left to fall, "that I am still angry. I am going to be angry for a very long time. You took 4 years from me. You took them without asking. You decided what was kindest for me without ever once putting the question into my hands. That is not something a single night fixes. That is not something a single confession erases. I know," he said. "But," her voice softened, "only a little, only at the edges. But you are not the man I thought you were tonight, and that means I am not the woman who walked into your study tonight, either, and that means I owe both of us the honesty of not signing anything tomorrow until I have decided who, exactly, I am divorcing. Because I do not divorce strangers without knowing them, Adrian, and as of tonight, you are a stranger to me again. A different kind, the kind I will have to choose whether or not I want to meet." He let out a breath he had clearly been holding without realizing. He did not move toward her. He did not reach. He did not say thank you, which she would have hated. He just stood there, 6 feet of distance still between them, and let her be. That, she thought, was the first kind thing he had done in their bedroom in 4 years. Not touching her. Not speaking. Just letting her exist on her own side of the room while she sorted through the wreckage. She turned, slowly, and walked to the window. The drapes were already half open. The snow outside had stopped falling sometime in the last hour. The lawn lay quiet and white under the moon, a blank page of a thing, the kind of view a woman could look at for a long time without thinking anything in particular, which was exactly what she needed. She pressed her fingertips against the cold glass. She watched her breath bloom and shrink against it. Behind her, she could hear him breathing. She could hear the small adjustments his body made when he wanted to come closer to her and forced himself not to. She had spent 4 years interpreting his silences as absence. She wondered, now, how many of them had actually been restraint. "Adrian," she didn't turn around. "Yes, when did you find out about the remission?" 11 weeks ago. She nodded slowly, and in 11 weeks, she said, "You did not find one moment, not one, to come up those stairs and tell me." She heard him swallow. "I came up the stairs," he said every night. "I stood outside that bedroom door, and I tried, every night, to remember how to open it. I had forgotten, Lena. That is the truth. I had forgotten how to walk into my own bedroom without flinching at what I might find on the other side. I had spent so long protecting you by staying away that staying away had become the only language I knew how to speak to you in." Her forehead leaned against the cold glass. She closed her eyes. 11 weeks, she said softly. That is how long I have been calling my sister at midnight and crying in the bathroom. That is how long I have been sitting at the kitchen table eating cold pasta because I could not bear to set two places anymore. That is how long the lawyer has had a folder with my name on it sitting in his second drawer. 11 weeks, Adrian. We could have had 11 weeks. He didn't answer. There was nothing he could say. They both knew it. The clock on the mantel in his study downstairs chimed faintly through the walls. 2 a.m. She finally turned. He was still standing where she had left him. The wooden box was still on the bed. His shoulders had lowered, somewhere in the last few minutes, not in defeat, but in the soft, dropped way of a man who had been bracing for a verdict for a very long time and had finally received it, even if the verdict was still being read aloud. "I want to ask you something," she said. "Anything if I had not come down those stairs tonight, if I had not said the word divorce, if I had stayed in this bedroom, alone, like every other night, would you have ever told me?" His silence was a wound. She watched him think about it. She watched him refuse to lie, which was the first version of him she had recognized in a long time. "I do not know," he said. "I want to tell you yes. I want to tell you I would have come up those stairs in March, on our anniversary, with the last letter and the truth and the rest of my life. I want to tell you that I would not have needed you to come downstairs and force me to be a man. But I have made a habit, Lena, of telling myself stories about my own courage that turned out not to be true. So I will not tell you yes." Her chest tightened. She nodded. "Thank you for that." "For what?" "For not pretending you would have." His mouth moved. He almost smiled. The smile did not finish. "Lena," his voice was very soft. "Yes, can I ask you something too?" She nodded once. "Are you still leaving in the morning?" The question hung in the air between them. She thought about it. She thought about it not the way she had thought about leaving for the last 11 weeks, with the cold, clean logic of a woman whose husband had stopped seeing her. She thought about it the way the question deserved to be thought about, now in this room, with everything she had just learned. "I do not know yet," she said. He nodded. "Okay, I am not lying to you, Adrian. I am not saying I do not know in order to give you hope I do not feel. I am saying I do not know because I do not, and that is the most honest answer either of us has been told tonight. I know." He paused. "It is more than I have any right to ask for." She crossed the room, not to him, to the bed. She sat down on the edge of it, this time on the side that had always been hers, and she pulled the wooden box closer to her thigh, and she rested one hand on top. The wood was warm under her palm, in a way wood is not usually warm. She thought of the years of his hands resting on top of it, the small, private weight of his secret, the dozens of letters he had written instead of sleeping beside her. "I am not going to read these tonight," she said again. "I told you. I know. I do not want you to read them either." He almost laughed. "They are addressed to you, Lena. I would not." "I know." She paused. "But I do not want you in the bedroom tonight." He nodded immediately. "Of course. Not because of anger. Not entirely. I just need the room. I need to lie down in it with what you have told me and not be looked at while I do." "I understand. There is a guest room down the hall." "I know. I am not punishing you. This is not the cold night, Adrian. This is the night I have to remember how to be in a room without you. Because for 4 years I had to remember how to be in this room without the version of you I thought I had lost. And tonight I have to learn how to be in this room without the version of you I thought I had married. Both are. There is only the man you actually are, and the woman I actually am, and we have not met yet, you and I. Not really." His eyes had gone wet again. He did not wipe them. He simply nodded, once, slow and grave. "Whatever you need, what I need, tonight, is sleep." and quiet. And the door closed between us, for the first time since I walked into your study tonight, by my choice instead of yours. He turned. He walked to the bedroom door. He paused there. His hand was on the brass handle. He did not look back. Lena, yes, thank you, he said, for not signing anything tonight. She did not answer. She did not have to. He opened the door and stepped through it and pulled it gently shut behind him. The latch settled with a small, soft. She listened to his footsteps move down the long hallway. She listened to the second door, the one to the guest room he had never slept in, open and close. She listened to the house settle around the new shape of the night. Then, only then, she let herself lie back on the bed. She did not undress. She did not get under the... She lay flat on her back, in her silk robe, with the wooden box of letters resting against her hip, and she looked up at the vaulted ceiling of the bedroom she had picked out 4 years ago. She did not cry. She had cried enough tonight. She let the silence hold her instead. She let the silence do what the silence had refused to do for 4 years. She let it. Sometime around 3 a.m, she lifted the lid of the box. She did not take out a letter. She did not read anything. She just looked at the dates on the envelopes. The handwriting of a man she had thought she had lost, written down on nights she had thought she had been alone. She closed the lid again. She turned off the lamp on her side of the room went dark. The radiator hissed in the corner, faithful as always. And then, for the first time in 11 weeks, Lena Whitaker slept without crying. She woke at 6. The room was still mostly dark. The window held a pale, gray light, the kind that arrives before sunrise has decided whether it is going to commit, and the snow on the lawn outside had taken on the soft, unreal blue of new morning. For one long suspended second, she did not remember the night before. She remembered only that she was warm. She remembered only that the radiator was still humming. She remembered only that something heavy and important had moved in the house while she slept, the way furniture sometimes moves in dreams without anyone visibly carrying it. Then her hand brushed against the wooden box beside her hip. And she remembered everything. She sat up. Her hair fell over her shoulders. Her robe was wrinkled from the night. Her bare feet found the hardwood floor, and this morning, for the first time in months, the floor did not feel cold. She did not know if the house had warmed, or if she had. She stood. She did not pick up the box. She let it stay where it was on the bed, because it belonged on a bed now, the way some objects, once they have been placed somewhere meaningful, refuse to be carried back to drawers. She walked to the window. She opened the curtains the rest of the way. The lawn was still empty. The driveway was still empty. The wrought iron gate at the far end of the property stood closed, the way it stood every morning, and beyond it the long private road wound away into the trees that bordered the estate. She put her palm against the glass. The cold of it traveled up her wrist. She held her hand there until the glass under her palm warmed. Then she went downstairs. The kitchen was empty. The coffee machine had been started. There was a fresh pot. There was a single mug set on the counter, the white one she had given herself for her 30th birthday, the one she preferred without ever telling anyone. Beside the mug, folded in half on a small square of cream-colored paper, there was a note. She did not unfold it right away. She poured her coffee first. She added cream. She wrapped her hand around the warm porcelain. She let herself stand at the kitchen island for a long moment, in the quiet, gray, blue-white morning of the only kitchen she had ever called hers. And she breathed. Then, she opened the note. The handwriting was his. 3 lines. No salutation. No signature. The same slanted blue ink as the letters in the box upstairs. I am in the study when you are ready. I am not asking for anything. I am only here. She read it twice. She folded it back in half. She set it on the counter. She drank her coffee, slowly, watching the windows of her own house turn from gray to white to gold as the sun finally decided to commit. She did not yet know what she was going to do. She did not yet know whether she would sign anything that morning, or any morning. She did not yet know whether the marriage that had been buried under 4 years of silence and one wooden box of letters could be exhumed, or rebuilt, or laid properly to rest. She knew only that the version of herself who had walked into Adrian's study at 12:47 that morning had been right about one thing. Tonight had been the last night she counted anything. From now on, whatever came next, she was going to count out loud. She set down the mug. She picked up the note. She walked, barefoot, across the cool marble floor of the foyer, toward the closed door of his study, where the man she had married 4 years ago was sitting and waiting, not for an answer, not for forgiveness, but only, finally, to be in the same room with his wife. She lifted her hand. She knocked, and as her knuckles met the wood, she understood, with a quiet, sharp clarity, that the empire she had once thought she was leaving had never been the house, or the marriage, or the wealth, or the name on the deed. The empire she had been leaving was the silence. And the silence, this morning, had finally fallen. The door opened. He was sitting behind the desk, exactly as she had left him 8 hours ago, except for the things that had changed and could not be hidden. The bourbon glass was gone. The monitors were dark. The shirt was the same wrinkled gray one. The cuffs still rolled twice, but the shoulders had a different gravity now, the kind a man's shoulders take on after a long night of telling the truth. He stood when she walked in. He did not come around the desk. He waited. She held the note in her hand. She did not put it down. "I read your note," she said. "Yes, I drank the coffee you started. I know." She walked to the leather chair on the visitor's side of his desk, the one she had only sat in twice in 4 years, once on the day they had signed the deed to the estate, once on a long afternoon the following spring when he had asked her opinion on a charity board appointment and then ignored her answer. She sat down. She set the folded note on the desk between them, on the small, clear space where his coffee mug was supposed to be. He watched her do it. He did not speak. "I have not made a decision," she said. "I know. I do not want you to think that walking down those stairs this morning means anything other than that I walked down those stairs. I do not think anything." She nodded. She let the silence settle. The morning light through the window behind him caught the small lines at the corners of his eyes, lines she had stopped looking at 4 years ago, lines she now realized had multiplied while she wasn't looking. She wondered, briefly, whether grief on a man's face moved the same way grief on a woman's did, whether the body, regardless of gender, simply kept its own quiet ledger of every night a person had spent lying alone in a room they were not supposed to be alone in. "I want to ask you for some things." He nodded once. "Anything. Do not promise me anything," she said. "Not yet. Not this morning. Not in this room. The version of you who makes promises in the first hour after a confession is not the version of you I need to know. I do not need the version that wants to repair me. I need the version that knows he cannot. Okay, I want you to tell me, today, the name of the doctor, Daniel Reyes, Memorial Sloan Kettering. The notes are in the bottom right drawer of this desk, in a folder marked with a date and nothing else. I will get them for you, whenever you want them." She blinked at the speed of his answer. He had clearly imagined being asked this question. He had imagined it many times. "I want to meet him. I want to sit in a room with him and ask my own questions. Not because I do not believe you. I do believe you. I want to meet him because I am 31 years old, and I have spent the last 4 years being kept on the outside of a thing that was happening inside my own marriage, and I am done being on the outside of anything that involves my husband's body. I will set it up today. I want to read the letters, she said, on my own time, in my own order, and I do not want you to ask me about them. Not at dinner. Not at breakfast. Not at any point. They are mine now. The first thing in this house that has ever been mine without your name attached to it. He nodded slowly. He did not flinch. Yes, I want to sleep in our bedroom alone for a while, she said, and I want the guest room to be where you live, not because I am punishing you. Because I need to remember what it feels like to be in our bed by my own choice, not because of cold. The cold has to go before anything else can come back, and the cold does not go just because we have spoken once. Yes, I want to keep my appointment with the lawyer this morning, she said. He did not flinch at that either. He did, however, go very still. Okay, I am not signing the papers, but I have an appointment, and I am going to keep it, because there is a folder in his second drawer with my name on it, and I owe it to the woman who put it there to walk into that office today and tell her, in her own voice, what changed last night. She does not deserve to find out by phone. She does not deserve to find out by anyone except me. His eyes held hers. I understand. I am going to tell her, she said, that I am pausing, not stopping. Pausing. There is a difference. And I am going to ask her to hold the folder. Not destroy it. Hold it, because I do not yet know which of these decisions I am making today, and which of them I am making in March, and I do not want to make any of them while my hands are shaking from a single night of new information. That is fair. I want you to come with me to my sister's house on Sunday. His eyebrows lifted slightly. He didn't speak. Not for forgiveness. Not for theater. I do not want her to forgive you. I want her to see your face, and I want her to hear, from you, the version of the last 4 years that I did not know. Because she has been holding me up while I cried in bathrooms for the last 11 weeks, and she deserves the dignity of the truth, even more than I did. And I am not going to be the one who tells it. You are. His mouth opened. He closed it. He nodded. I will go. I am not promising anything beyond Sunday, Adrian. I want you to understand that. Every request I am making this morning is a request, not a contract. I am not signing your name back onto my future today. I am only agreeing not to sign it off today. I know that. And I want one more thing. His hand settled flat on the desk. He waited. I want to know, she said, what you wrote in the last letter. The one from the hospital parking garage. The one you wrote 11 weeks ago. The one you were going to give me in March. His face changed. Just slightly. The way a man's face changes when an old prepared answer suddenly becomes a new live one. Lena, his voice was lower than it had been. I cannot tell you that one. Not yet. She tilted her head. Why? Because if you read it in a month, or in 6 months, or in March, or never, I want it to be the first time you hear those words from me. If I say them now, in this room, the morning after the worst night either of us has ever had, you will not know whether I am saying them because I mean them, or because I am terrified of losing you, and I have already taken 4 years of certainty away from you. I will not take that one away, too. She looked at him for a long, steady moment. The morning light had shifted across the room. It was hitting the bookshelves now. Her grandmother's old set of poetry sat on the second shelf, untouched, exactly where she had placed it on the second day of their marriage. The leather of the spines had aged. The dust on top of them had not. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. She stood. He stood. She picked up the note from the desk and folded it once more, smaller this time, and slid it into the pocket of her robe. He watched her do it. He did not ask why. She did not explain. She walked to the door of the study. She stopped, one hand on the frame, and she turned her head, just enough that her profile caught the morning light. Adrian, yes, last night you locked the door. I know. Do not do that again. Not to me. Not to anyone. Whatever else happens between us, in March, or in 6 months, or in a year, you do not get to lock another door on me. Not the front door. Not the study door. Not the door of any room I am standing on the other side of, asking to be let in. His throat moved. I will not. Good. She did not turn back. She walked out of the study, down the hall, past the photographs on the wall that she would, sometime in the next several weeks, take down one by one and look at the way they deserved to be looked at, not as a museum of what she had thought her marriage was, but as a record of the moments a man had been quietly trying to memorize the woman he was afraid to keep. She would replace them, eventually, with new photographs. Or with nothing. She had not yet decided. That, too, would be her choice. She climbed the staircase. She went into the bedroom. The wooden box was still on the bed, where she had left it. She picked it up. She carried it to the window seat she had never used, the one she had bought because she had thought, 4 years ago, in a furniture showroom in Greenwich, that there would be mornings she would sit on it, with her feet tucked under her. Reading, she set the box on the window seat. She sat down beside it. She looked out at the snow on the lawn, at the wrought iron gate, at the long private driveway that today she would drive down for a lawyer's appointment she was no longer going to keep in the way she had planned to keep it. She opened the box. She did not pick up the first envelope. She did not pick up the last one. She picked, instead, the one in the middle, the third from the bottom of the stack, the one with no date she could read without looking too closely. She held it. She did not open it. Not yet. She closed her eyes. She let the morning come into her face. She listened, for a moment, to the very small, very ordinary sound of her own breathing, and she realized that for the first time in 11 weeks, possibly for the first time in 4 years, her breath was steady. She did not know what came next. She did not know if she would sit on this window seat next week, or next month, or never again. She did not know if the man downstairs in the study would, in a year, still be downstairs in the study, or beside her in this room, or in another house entirely with the divorce papers signed and his side of the bed packed up. She did not know, and that not knowing, today, was no longer the kind of not knowing that hurt. It was the other kind. The kind that finally, after 4 years, had something in it that almost resembled possibility. She opened the envelope. She read the first line of the letter. She did not read the rest, not that morning. The first line was enough. The first line said, in his small slanted blue handwriting, on a page dated some Tuesday and some October she had spent thinking he no longer noticed her. Lena, I do not know how to come home to you anymore, but I am trying to remember. She set the letter down on her lap. She put both her hands on top of it, palms flat, the way a person rests her hands on the cover of a book she is not yet ready to finish. The snow on the lawn outside caught the sun. The gate at the end of the driveway stayed closed. Somewhere downstairs, the radiator hissed faithfully, and Lena Whitaker, 31 years old, in a wrinkled silk robe, in a bedroom she had stopped warming 3 years ago, and might one day learn to warm again, sat in the early morning light with a letter in her lap and a husband 2 floors below her, and a marriage that was no longer the marriage she had asked to leave. And she did. Very quickly. The one thing she had not done at her own kitchen table, or in her own bathroom, or on her own pillow for 11 straight weeks. She smiled. It was a small smile. It was not forgiveness. It was not certainty. It was not even, in any complete sense, hope. It was the kind of smile a woman gives a morning that has, against every expectation she walked into the night, decided not to be the end of her. Outside, somewhere far off down the long driveway, a single bird called. The snow began, very gently, to fall again. And in the room above the study, in the house she had once thought was her cage, with the wooden box on the seat beside her and the first letter open on her lap, she stayed where she was, in the soft falling light, for a long, quiet, unhurried while. The first morning of whatever came next had begun. She sat there until the coffee in her mug downstairs had gone cold. She did not go back for it. She thought, instead, about the long list of small, ordinary things she had not allowed herself to want in 4 years. The sound of footsteps on the stairs that were not avoiding her. The feel of a hand at the small of her back in a kitchen doorway. The unremarkable, almost boring weight of a husband sitting beside her on a couch on a Tuesday night, while neither of them said anything important. She had thought these things were lost. She had been wrong about a great many things in the last 12 hours. She might, she allowed herself to consider, be wrong about that too. The bird outside called again. The snow kept falling. She picked up the second letter from the box. She did not open it. She held it in her free hand, balanced against the first one already open on her lap, and she let herself feel, for one small, honest moment, the weight of being a woman who had something to read. The morning, somewhere below her in the warming rooms of her quiet house, kept patiently beginning. And so, after long winters of stillness, she would,